Hi guys, my name is Anna, you're watching simcue, and without further ado, let's get into this video. So today we are building in Myshuno because we are building the sandwich shop from Wizards of Waverly place, including the apartment and also the magical lair at the very end. Today's build was requested by Sofie. Thank you so much for your request. I have to admit though that I was a little bit hesitant when it came to building this because I myself wasn't like a big fan of Wizards of Waverly Place. I definitely remember having watched it as a child on Disney Channel and also enjoying it. I just think as an adult, it doesn't wake that many memories for me. So just to be completely honest, in the beginning, I was thinking of just looking through a few screenshots that I could hopefully find on Google and then like call it a day, do my best, and then be done with it. Because I still wanted to make the build because you wanted to see it. I just wasn't highly invested in it, but that sure changed when I got started because I went on a hunt to get as many different angles as possible, and in the end Google just did not suffice, so I had to scroll through I think the first like 3 episodes of the show because I do have a Disney Plus subscription just to find what I was looking for, and that was for sure a trip down memory lane. And just the video quality, like not talking about the show, just the resolution on the show itself was so bad, which I couldn't help but laugh at because we've just gotten used to like such high quality. And I also absolutely loved when there were these like transitions, quite bad transitions, but basically with like the Russo children like jumping up and doing different poses, going like yay and wee, and it was so funny and so nostalgic. So I have to admit that completely changed my opinion about the build, and I was now highly invested. I was like, I'm going to do my very best to build the absolute best looking sandwich shop ever. And so that is what you're going to see here today. While I have been rambling and reminiscing the show, we already have a lot of the shell and the wallpaper. We have the columns down. It's really starting to take shape. So for the desk, for the cash register, that is such a difficult word to say, I decided to go with a bar because if you want to actually play with this build, which I always plan my builds so that they are playable, I thought you would probably use it using businesses and hobbies, and then it would just be nice to have another activity, even though it doesn't make that much sense. But I just figured, you know, it was something extra for the Sims to do. So we do have a bar, and then of course we're going to have all of the tables and chairs around the place, and there are actually quite a lot of different kind of seating areas because we have these tables that are just all over the floor, and then we have these like built-in cubicle, but we also have what is supposed to look like a train car that you can eat in, which is what we are creating right here. And I don't know how it never occurred to me as a child, at least it's not something I remember, but the fact that this whole thing is supposed to look like an actual train station, I don't know if I had forgotten or just completely missed that as a child, but I did find that very endearing, like building it here as an adult. So there were a lot of different elements that all sort of needed to come together, and one of them is what is supposed to look like this train cart. And you can also see in just a few clips that means that it has those like things on top, kind of small shelves for any like luggage. So I knew I wanted to try and mimic that, but I didn't really know what kind of piece to use. So I started out with this like awning, but it just felt a little bit too big. Like if you actually wanted to play on this lot, I feel like it would visually be really annoying. So instead I found this pipe. It's not really just a pipe, it's for like rainwater, but from businesses on Hobbies, and manipulating that with the tool mod, raising it up, I do think it just adds something that is like on top. So I did it on both sides just because it's visually not quite as bothersome. And then out front of the train cart, I added this sized up trim from Spa Day as a yellow line because you will find those at most train stations and metro stations, and it is also in the series. So from there we're moving on to this little cubicle, which I honestly struggled with quite a bit because nothing really fit. It seems to me like it's made from these like wooden benches that you might also just find at a regular train station. And while we have benches that might look like those, the issue is that we don't really have any like wraparound benches. So I tried out some different things and eventually decided that I couldn't really do the whole overlap thing. I just personally didn't think it looked that good. So I went in with the same benches as we have in the train just to have a bit more cohesive, and then adding these base game chairs that also match. So these tables and also multiple of the ones in the train terrain are actually not usable whatsoever. But I really don't think that's going to be a problem because you can only really have like 20 sims load into the environment, so there should be plenty of tables for visitors to sit at. So next we're building what I like to just call like a kitchen cutout, because I don't really know the proper word for it, but this is where they serve the food through this like window. Now, it had already bugged me a little bit when furnishing the train. It just didn't really feel like crammed enough, but at the same time, looking at everything, I felt like the proportions were somewhat right. But then going into the kitchen, it became very clear that no, it actually was just overall too big. So when you just saw me like move those things, that's because I minimized everything by like one tile. But later I actually realized that that is not enough, so I go back in and minimize it even more. I think one tile in both width and length. I didn't record it because it's really a boring and annoying process to have to do, but I will point it out so that you can hopefully see the difference between when we have the like bigger apartment and then when we have the smaller one, which is the one we end up going with. So you just saw a short clip of me placing a portal. We will come back to that. If you do not know, those portals are from Realm of Magic. They are a debug item, but they work just like the ones in the Realm of Magic world, and you can use them to connect to completely different rooms, which works absolutely amazing for this build because that little like closet or cooler, I'm actually a little bit unsure, but through that door in the kitchen, they both have the entrance to their ingredients, sure, but it is also the door to their magical lair. So we will come back later and connect that portal to that magical lair somewhere else. So here I wanted to show you how I do the railing. So these are all debug pieces, and while debug pieces can rarely be rotated, which was a little bit of a shame because I did want to have a railing that like went downwards, I do find that debug items can in other ways be manipulated even more because they often take up like fewer tiles. So raising these bars from high school years up and down, I do think that actually worked out quite nicely, and I will definitely point them out when we also later will see them in the tour. Moving on to the outside, this was actually a little bit difficult to find any references for because the majority of the time you see it in the series, at least from like the few clips that I saw, they are primarily just at like street level, so you don't really see what the rest of the building looks like. So instead I managed to find a picture of what seems to be the set that gives us a little bit more insight as to what this building could look like. And I think I've mentioned in past videos that I'm not really allowed to show anything because of copyright. I've been looking a bit more into fair use, and I do think that that is also why we see YouTubers use a lot of pictures a lot of times. So I am crossing my fingers that my understanding of a fair use is correct so that I can show you just a few screenshots, because it really makes so much more sense, I feel like, what I'm talking about when you also have a picture, because I fully understand if you like me cannot remember what this place actually looked like even if you watched it as a child. So we're jumping ahead for the layout of the apartment. So this would be the first floor or second floor depending on where you're from, and I didn't show you all of outside, and that is because it will undergo multiple changes throughout the video, both with changing rooms on the inside but also with sizing everything down. Now hopefully what I'm building is pretty self-explanatory, because I do want to talk a little bit about the whole like making of the series and also why there were certain parts of this apartment that was quite difficult to actually recreate. So I don't know the specific year, I didn't look it up, but Wizards of Waverly Place is clearly like an early 2000s show, and that also means that it was more heavily based on building sets. Now if you haven't watched a whole lot of Wizards of Waverly Place, you might have watched a lot of Friends, and that is also sets. So what that means is that you would have this entire room, and then basically everything would be filmed from this like one angle, or at least a camera panning from like one side to another side. So there's always a wall that we don't see. And in many ways that was great because it did simplify certain things, but making the different sets work together and match up inside of a building was definitely a difficult task, because from the street view and from inside the sandwich shop, we get an overall pretty good idea of what the building looks like. In the sandwich shop, we also see the stairs that lead up to the apartment on top. And this is what I really could not wrap my head around, because we know where the stairs are placed. We also know from the clips from the apartment where the entrance to the apartment is, like where the door is. But we also in the apartment see these like doors and windows that are clearly access to a balcony. And all of that just does not add up because there's really only one spot where we can have the windows for the balcony. It wouldn't make sense for them to be out towards the street, and we also see from the picture I showed you earlier that there are no big windows. So also taking the layout of the apartment into consideration, I had to rotate everything, which means that I had to move the entrance to the apartment. I do think that ends up working out nicely and makes so much more sense for the build, but that was definitely something that took me so long to really figure out. Now, while I've been rambling / complaining about that whole issue, you've seen the dining area, you've also seen the kitchen, and if you don't remember, you've probably realized that this is very colorful, which is also just a lot of fun. And honestly, for these kind of builds, also when I build my own like childhood home, like these early 2000 build and also like 2010, this is where the Sims 4 kind of peaks, because it's also around this time that the Sims 4 came out, so a lot of the base game items match this like so much better. And if you've ever, like me, wondered why do these base game items have these bright color swatches, well, this is why. So behind the couches we have these bookshelves that sort of divide the living room and the dining area, and this is also the wall that is technically the entrance. So the apartment was still way too big, it has not been sized down yet, so I was trying to cut parts of it off. I've definitely done that in another build as well, so that the outside looked like the outside should and the inside looked like the inside should, and we do that by just having this like a double room situation. But I am so happy that I eventually sized everything down because it actually made all of the walls make so much more sense. So we're moving on to Alex Russo's room, and this is after the entire build, like every single floor has been sized down. But Alex's room was definitely a bit of a struggle as well, because we do see these like two big windows, but we also see a diagonal wall, and at least for my build that didn't make sense anywhere. So I think it's safe to say that by now we're more so doing something that is inspired by what we see in the series and is like a little less accurate. But I still try to get as much of the furniture and the colors right. So Alex has these, which in my opinion is a little bit disgusting because I feel like it would collect a lot of dust and bacteria, but she has these like fur walls, and we don't have any wallpaper like that, but I did find these curtains from high school years that we could add to sort of mimic that and create a little bit more texture. Now I'll admit that I was a bit surprised when furnishing Alex's room because it was a lot more like cutesy than I remembered, because I feel like I remember Alex as being kind of like edgy and wearing like darker clothes, and she was not like the other girls. I really feel like I looked up to her. I thought she was like so cool, but then I feel like her room kind of clashed with that and was a lot more like princessy and girly, and not that that is an issue at all. I just found it kind of funny. But again, that did work out quite well because it meant that a lot of the base game furniture actually looked really great in this room. So overall, this room primarily uses the base game and high school years. For wallpaper, we have partially brick wall. We also have what seems to be some wooden paneling. And then for the wall that we cannot see as the viewer, I decided to go in with wallpaper. We are slowly getting into decorating this space, and Alex is quite messy. Whatever shots of her room I could find, there was always like clothes on the floor and just in general a lot of items all around. And I feel like that also just made so much sense at the time, and it's also what works out, which I mentioned in pretty much every video, what works out so much better in The Sims 4, because all of these sets seem really busy. And I think it's partially because it's like 2000 something, but also because when you're working with the same scene, like the same set over and over and over, you probably want to keep people busy and always have something to look at. And then of course in this situation also because I do think they're trying to sell Alex as like a regular teenage girl who has a lot of mess in her room so that we can really see just like everything that's going on. But as someone who enjoys decorating, I really should not be complaining. Now the shots in Alex's room also show a doorway into another room, which I imagine is a walk-in closet. But for this upstairs space, I did have some more room left over, so she in this build also has a second door that leads into a private bathroom. So you're going to see a little bit of me decorating the walk-in closet, but you're not going to see anything else from the upstairs, and that is because we don't have any references. At least I couldn't find any. There might be like some episode somewhere in there within the seasons where like the boys' rooms are shown, but it wasn't the first few clips. When I searched for it, it didn't really show up, so I just did those, like made something up by myself myself, and that's why I'm not showing you the final result until the tour. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, here I have deleted some walls so that I can move these like Polaroid pictures a little bit further from the wall so that this like corkboard can go behind it. And I felt like that was just a nice, neat little detail because the Polaroids were kind of drowning in the wallpaper that I had chosen, so they were just popping a little bit more with the corkboard behind them. For the walk-in closet, I didn't do all that much. It is quite simple, and I just went with what I felt like could fit Alex's style. So we're using some more items from high school years, and in general just adding a lot of clothes and a lot of shoes. We definitely see that. I think it was already in like the second episode that she is all about this sale, so she definitely cares about her shoes and her clothes. So we're now back in the living room, and I feel like I've already mentioned that by now the whole thing has been sized down, and you will see that as we pan the camera around a little bit. And the living room is kind of the same thing, honestly, as Alex's room. It's just a lot of decorations, which I honestly kind of love. Now, I'm always going back and forth of like how much I should show you of the decorating process, because I feel like it can seem a bit boring, but I also feel like when I do it this way, it can also feel a little bit like satisfying. And I do think that it's the decor that really brings a place to life. I'm going for the same process as I usually do, which is just finding all of the items that I feel like can fit the space and then placing them one by one. But I feel like if I do it like one little area at a time, it doesn't get too jumpy and might still be interesting for some people to watch. So the Russo family has a lot of pillars, which I added, raised up, and then also rotated them a little bit with the tool mod so they were a little bit more like sunk into the couches. And the kitchen is also heavily decorated. I added in those 2 shelves because I did see them in one of the pictures, but it also meant that we could add even more decorations. And it's just in general like really cluttered, which I do not like for real life, but I absolutely love in The Sims 4, and I love creating these cluttered spaces. So that's also why you're seeing me move counters and then custom place items so that we can fit even more. I will playtest that I have left a counter that they can actually cook on, because right now I'm a little bit unsure, but I will make sure that they have a counter that they can cook on. And then from the kitchen, we are moving on to the other side of the living room. So the side that we never see because this is where the cameras are placed. So you might also notice that because everything has been sized down, we now don't have that like double room situation anymore. And these windows are actually the windows for the outside. And it was definitely worth it to change certain things so that this build would match The Sims 4 so much better. So we'll of course show you this in the tour, but the yellow door, instead of being an entrance, becomes the door for a toilet. And then we have the entrance next to the kitchen instead. For the dining room, it was definitely a bit more difficult to see what kind of decorations they actually had, but I do think that this turned out quite nicely. I just improvised and placed what I really felt like would fit. But even though we're finishing up decorating the apartment and we've also finished up the sandwich shop, we do have one very important thing left, and that is the Russo lair. So as you can probably tell from the black void around it, I placed the Russo lair in the basement. I was fiddling a bit with the sizing, as I had also been for the rest of the place, but eventually we get there, and you can probably notice that I do have that portal. So this is the portal exit. So your sim will just enter through the kitchen, go swoop, and then be transported down here to the basement to the lair. I really enjoyed creating this lair because it's just so busy, and if you thought that the apartment had a lot of decorations, you are in for a treat, because this lair has decorations on every single surface, every single wall. And I definitely also think that for me, this was what brought back the majority of my memories of this show. I think as a child, it was just like so magical, as it's also supposed to be. So I really like the lair. So this is also when we introduced the pack Realm of Magic, because again, if you actually wanted to play with this build, you would probably play with some spellcasted, so it makes sense that you would have all of the items that you need for that. And that is in general my approach when I am tasked with creating something that we know from film or series or from real life architecture, is to find the sweet balance between making it look as accurate as possible, but also being playable. And I know that there are a lot like me who just watch the videos, enjoy the videos, and don't actually use the builds, but I do like the challenge of making it playable, and I also think it's the only thing that really makes sense, is to ensure that you can actually use the build. But we are now getting back into decorating, and for this I used a lot more debug items. If you don't know the difference between debug and live edit objects, even though I basically call everything debug items. But the difference is that debug is oftentimes the items that your sim can interact with. So this is why we have all of the crystals, we have all of the fossils, we have the wands, we have all of the potions. Those are all debug items because they are like created and used in game. And then the live edit objects are all of the objects you see like around the world. And the only reason I'm really mentioning this is because if you don't have the mod, the Better Build by mod installed, and you have to use the codes, like the cheat codes for it, it's a little bit easier if you know which code to use. But otherwise, this is the same process as you have already seen. And this is also why I will be happy to hear in the comments if you like watching these parts or if you prefer the videos where I cut it out, because it can be a little bit repetitive, but as I've already mentioned, it can also be kind of satisfying and everything kind of comes together with the decorations. So it might also make sense to leave it in there. I am a little bit unsure. I can't really figure out the right balance myself. I just know that I like to decorate. I think aside from building, it is definitely my favorite thing. So my least favorite is like furnishing, I guess. If you haven't watched me building a tiny home, in that video I explain a bit more how I actually decorate, like raising everything to the proper height and custom placing everything. For decorating the lair, it's a lot of the same process, like over and over, and I honestly don't think I can keep commenting on every single bit. So instead I will leave you with some music and then I will be back at the tour. So I have loaded up the entire thing. I had completely forgotten that I didn't show you any footage of me finishing the outside either. So we have a lot to go over. But if we start with the main build, we have the little pop out for like the subway station situation that we got going on. And then if we head on inside, I think this is probably what you saw quite a lot of. So not that much has changed. As I mentioned, we did squish everything a little bit. And the only thing that really changes is that we now only have 2 steps, whereas before we had like 3 steps. Other than that, I think the only thing you didn't really see was down here at the entrance. I added this little like live edit object because they seem to be selling some newspaper, and then also a vending machine because I feel like there was a little like bubblegum thing. So I added that instead. Then over here we have the kitchen and also the little like closet cooler kind of thing with the portal right here. But since you've already seen most of it, I just want to show you the angle that you would probably get in the series, where you would be watching from like this angle. So this would be the camera in the kitchen, and then also moving in here would be like around here, and then of course they can like pan the camera around. Moving upstairs to the apartment, if we start with an overview, you can see that these are the stairs, and that's why we have the entrance over here, whereas in the series the entrance is technically through this yellow door. So instead in here, I decided to make it into this like lime green bathroom. The other thing that you didn't really get to see is the balcony situation that we have out here. Nothing special, just added a few pieces of furniture so that they can go grilling. And then I absolutely love how the living room turned out, even though we don't see any of these walls. I think it actually looks really nice, and I'm so happy, even though it was such a bother. But the fact that I sized everything down so that these walls now match and all of the windows match, and I'm happily surprised with how well it turned out, both from like the outside, like yeah, this gap is a little bit bigger, but I actually do think that it looks really great from like pretty much all angles. Upstairs, so like the second floor where they have all of the rooms, this is what you didn't see a lot of, where I furnished things like off camera. So you saw Alex's room, which is the one that we have here. We have her walk-in closet, and then we have her little bathroom, which is not really, again, anything special. I kind of imagine that this was the bathroom that the apartment came with, and then she of course like added her own items. But right now this is really the least interesting, because we have the stairs up here, and in here is the older brother's room. I just had to look it up. His name is Justin, so this is Justin's room. Justin, I feel like, is very well put together. He's a little bit geeky, so I gave him some like geeky posters. He cares a lot about like his education. He seems pretty smart, so he also has a chessboard, and then of course he just has a little like desk situation because he seems like he studies quite a lot. The room isn't that big, but I do think it's kind of cozy, and yeah, there's really not that much more to say. I hope that you can see everything. Nothing special was really added, maybe except for this thing. This is a little like high school item. It's kind of cute. So he does have that. Then zooming back out on the other side of this little like hallway situation, we have Max's room. Now in this build, I would say that he is a child, so that the other two are teenagers and he's a child. That's just what like works best. But I did try to make a slightly older child looking room. So he has his bed, he's got a lot of posters. I feel like he plays a lot of games. He also seems to be more into sports, so I added a bit of that. We got some sport posters, we got something on the carpet, we got some items over here. But if you want to play with it, I also wanted to add some actual playability, like some playable items. So we do have the little junior wizard starter set. Perfect. And I also realized I forgot to remove a little lamp. Not a big deal. I will make sure that that is not there when I upload this build. And then next to him we have the parents room, and for the parents room I think what I went with was just that, again, early 2000s. I feel like you didn't care that much about whether colors matched or not, so I just wanted to use a lot of colors and not really care too much about whether it matched or anything. And I do think it very much looks like a parent's bedroom from like early 2000s. They also have an ensuite bathroom, again just regular bathroom. The apartment came with it, they added their items, it works. The last bathroom is down at the other end of the hallway, so this would be Justin and Max that would use this bathroom, and it's the same kind of idea, kind of simple, adding some color pops here and there, and then that's it. Now, even though it was the last thing you saw, here is the lair. What you didn't see is that I did end up adding an extra room because I found that for gameplay it made sense to have a cauldron, and I did use this beautiful bookcase door that we got with the latest event. Otherwise, I didn't do a whole lot. This was the last thing. I was kind of done with the build at this time. I just added lights. Do whatever you like, add something cooler. It's there for practicality and nothing else. We also have the portal here, the exit portal. I did size these down. These are actually quite a lot bigger, so sizing them down, and unfortunately that does mean that you get this weird situation. Otherwise, you saw most of it. Again, just add it as much as possible. There isn't actually that much to use down here. Your sim don't really have any reason to go down here except for the cauldron, so you kind of have to force them to use this room. This board is just one from high school years. I don't think that they can use it. I don't really care. Again, it's the mix of like having things that they can use, but also making it look as accurate to what we see in the film as possible. I think it's cool. I like it. It was definitely a lot of fun. Now, going back outside, I actually do really like making all of my builds blend into the area. So here in the back, we have a little like hot dog stand because we're using Growing Together. We can also have some bikes. We got some benches people can sit at. I added in an extra street light that matched the one that we already have in the surroundings. That is definitely something that I like to do. It also means that I think you get the best potential out of the build if you place it in the same spot as me. I think we're in the Spice District, and then it's called the Old Salt House. So for this secondary building, I didn't care too much about like how accurate to the film it was. I did like see a few pictures, but basically it's just supposed to like look like stores down here, and then you can see I left everything blank. Upstairs, it's like the same thing. It's black on the inside, and then windows, and over here a few balconies. So I think just some small details that I would like to point out just because you might not otherwise see them if you don't actually download the build. I kind of like to build, and it's not really hiding Easter eggs, but just small details so that you can like go and explore for yourself. We do have all of the like bins here on the side. Here I added this little small don't step on the grass kind of sign. I also really like adding these for like rain. Do they have a name? Storm drain. These are also live edit objects. We have a hydrant. We have a sign. We also have this little like metal pole so that you can't really ride like motorcycles in this area. We have a manhole that is probably also something to do with sewage, I'm pretty sure. And then I think out here in the front, I added a sign with some cones and then also this little like arrow that points to a bus stop. So there are just all of those like small cute details. We have some more sign. We have here some like chalk probably pointing to like the number 1, I don't know, cookie or bread in here. We have these items that are also debug items from businesses and hobbies, and everything just adds to really sell this as like a city area. Now, unfortunately, if you use this lot and you open a business here, people aren't really going to walk around here, but I think it's all right. I still think it's really cool. So that is everything. I wish you a lovely day. I hope to see you next time, and bye!